morning, distinguished guests, road safety colleagues. A very warm welcome to this session on reaping the benefits of safe speeds. My name is Jean Breen. I'm from the UK and I've been asked to be the moderator for this session. And in the context of road safety, I think it's fair to say that no issue is more important than managing speed. It's at the core of road injury prevention, the core of safe mobility, central to a safe system designed towards zero deaths and serious injuries, and also important for other goals, as we'll hear later. It featured strongly in the Stockholm Declaration. We heard a lot about it yesterday in the various sessions. It's one of 12 voluntary targets to 2030, and in 2 of the 9 recommendations of the academic expert report, which was a very excellent report in my view. And we've got a very can-do task over the next hour to show how managing speed relates to other aspects of road safety, to provide some examples of how countries, cities, companies are prioritising speed management to very good effects, and importantly to identify key priorities for the next decade. And we're helped in this by contributions from our expert and our multi-sectoral and most eminent panel, and we're going to have a discussion over the next 35-40 minutes, followed by then some questions from the floor. Now, without further ado, if I could introduce our panel. We're very pleased to have Dr. Asaji Ahiniri, who is the Minister for Health in Nigeria, on our panel. Mr. Saad Al-Mahanadi is President of the Public Works Authority in Qatar. Mr. Hart Schaefer is the World Bank's Vice President for the South Asia region. Mr. Dave Cliff is the Chief Executive Officer of the Global Road Safety Partnership. Our expert is Dr. Soames Jobe, is the Global Road Safety Lead for the World Bank and head of the Global Road Safety Facility, the GRSF. And our rapporteur, Mr. Deepan Bose, who will be writing up this session, is also from the GRSF. So without further ado, could I ask Soames to set the scene for our discussion?
Thank you, Jean, and hi everyone, and thank you for being here. So, reaping the benefits of safe speed. I want to just start by acknowledging UK Aid and Bloomberg Philanthropies who fund the Global Road Safety Facility for this work. As an overview, I'm very briefly going to talk about the issues of trading off death and injury for speed, the scale of our global road safety problem, the value of managing speed, some of the resistance to managing speed and the opportunities we have from that analysis. First, trading off death and serious injury. The roads are the only component of anything government runs which would contemplate this kind of policy position. Imagine if we did this in another area. Imagine if the court system which the governments ran worked like our roads. So Soames, you get caught speeding. So take my wife Chicka out and cut off a leg. Made her wait on the side of the road 2 hours for help. Take that stranger up there who happened to be nearby, kill him slowly in front of his family, and then punish me for the consequence. That's the system the roads operate. To make it worse, we could do something more drastic. We could make more of that by increasing speeds. Imagine if our courts did that. Imagine if we said, let's save money on the courts. Let's cut down all of our murder cases to a maximum of 1 day in court. We'll only kill an extra 50 innocent people by virtue of wrong convictions, but we'll save money. None of us would think that was a sane policy position. But that's what we do by talking about increasing speeds on our roads. In part, as a consequence of that, the crisis we face is profound. We all know the figures. We know that there has been improvements during the decade, but we will not meet the targets. I want to point out just one addition to that. If we simply extrapolate the data points from the last two WHO reports, what we find is this, that in the next decade, we will have over 17 million injuries and over 17 million deaths and 500 million injuries. It is a problem the scale of a world war, but it's not being treated like a world war. It's not being resourced like a world war. And we also know that road crashes limit the economic growth of low and middle income countries. One of the reasons we're interested in trading off death and injury for speed and therefore the economy is actually an illusion. We look at this kind of graph and say, yes, look at that. If I increase speeds, I save travel time. But actually, that's only a very small part of the picture, only a small part of the impact of speeds in our net travel costs. The rest of that study, by the way, is right there. This one was done in Iran, and it shows that as you increase speeds, your crash costs go up, your fuel costs go up, your emissions go up, your particulate emissions go up. It doesn't have it there, but your cost of vehicle maintenance also goes up. When you take into account all of the costs of speed, it turned out that in Iran, the economically ideal speed on a good quality motorway was 73 kilometres an hour. Not the debates we have around should it be 110 or 130, 73 was the economically ideal speed. One of the reasons speed is so fundamental is we know what it does. And this classic graph, which has been essentially replicated in many other studies with small variations, shows that for every 1% increase in speed, we will see about a 4% increase in deaths. On the opportunity side, for every 1% decrease we get in speed, we will achieve a 4% decrease in deaths. What's more, the value is huge. This graph shows the benefit-cost ratio of various methods of managing speed. And as you can see, some of them give us 17 to 1 back. For every dollar we spend managing speed with these mechanisms, we will get $17 back in savings. For others, 14, 12, etc. These are fantastic investments compared with the kind of investments governments normally invest in, where if you get 10% back on your money, you're doing fantastically well. In these, you're getting 1,700% back on your money for managing speed. Part of the resistance to managing speed comes from the first thing I've already talked about, the mistaken belief that every increase in speed will simply improve the economy. It just doesn't, as those graphs I've shown demonstrate. The second area of error is really personal experience and the way each of us, including our key decision makers, our key politicians, judge the risk of speed. You can hardly talk to anyone about speed who's a motorist without them saying to you, but I've been driving for X years, it doesn't matter. That can be anything from 6 months to 30 years. I haven't killed myself yet, it can't be that dangerous, you must be wrong. They say either that, or if they believe our statistics, they say, well, that proves how fantastically good a driver I am because it hasn't happened to me yet. So either way, our statistics and the scientific reality of speed is misjudged fundamentally by humans and our frailties in terms of our capacity to deal with probabilities. The other thing which limits us is a mistaken belief in the effects of speed on congestion. A lot of places where we go to and say, if you get speeds down, you'll get all of these road safety benefits. They say, but hang on, I've already got congestion, I can't do that. And essentially, the average person thinks this. If I get speeds going up, I simply get more vehicle throughput through a given location. But that's not right. It's actually completely wrong. So this is the reality. So the pink line is the theoretical line of what should happen. Each of those blue dots is a real-world example of speed and throughput from a location, which shows that essentially that pink line is very, very close model to reality. And people look at this and say, no, this can't be right. So as I increase speeds, the vehicle throughput goes up. As I continue to increase speeds, the vehicle throughput goes back down. How could that be? And I think the answer is fairly simple if we think about how we were taught to drive. Maybe we weren't all taught this way, but we did something close to this. I was taught, if you're doing 30 or 40 kilometres an hour, you need 2 seconds headway to the vehicle in front. If you're doing 50 or so, 60, you need 3 seconds. If you're doing 80 or more, you need 4 seconds. If we all drive to approximately that, and we count vehicles through an intersection, then at 30 or 40 kilometres an hour, there's going to be a vehicle going through every 2 seconds. At 80 kilometres an hour, there's going to be a vehicle going through every 4 seconds. So the simple way we drive to headways means that this is what you would expect if you analyse carefully. So in many, many instances, lowering speeds will improve congestion in a very counterintuitive but actually correct way. So we have from that huge opportunities which I think we're missing because of our misunderstanding of the effects of speed. And managing speed to this level will just give us lots of gains. One of the other things we hear is that, well, actually, people don't ever want speeds managed. But everywhere I go in low and middle income countries in the world, I see places where people have put up their own speed humps. Those are photos from various countries in Latin America and Asia and Africa. And we see people put ropes across the road. They put big dirt speed humps because their children are being injured or killed and they want speeds down. So we shouldn't listen to this very simple view that people don't want it. Some people don't want it, some people do. It's a much more balanced view in the community than we will typically see in the media. And the practical reality of our opportunity is that it works. Here are just some examples of various studies which show, and it's the simplest thing, put speed limits up, deaths, injuries go up. Put speed limits down, deaths, injuries, serious crashes go down. If you manage them with infrastructure, it will be even more powerful. And some of those infrastructure solutions are already being used. These are examples of photos I've taken in Senegal and in Korea, where fantastic, simple infrastructure solutions are forcing speeds down to safe levels for pedestrians. So from that, just a few messages. Road deaths and injuries are one of the great global failures of our society. And speed is the toxin, it is the cause of our fundamental trauma and injury to the human body. Managing speeds down is an incredibly powerful way to overcome that death and trauma. It's also effective, it's cost effective, and it is of known value. It also gives us all of these other benefits. It not only saves lives and injuries, it improves the economy in ways we would not have expected. It reduces greenhouse gas emissions, it improves health, and it creates greater inclusion for those people who can't afford fast cars but are trying to cross roads with fast cars on them. And with that, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Soames, for that insightful presentation. You covered a lot of ground in a small amount of time, but you set out the rationale for speed management and the opportunities which it provides to save a lot of human misery and societal cost. Let's start then, please, with our discussion with our panel. I'd like to first invite Mr. Hart Schaefer, Vice President of the World Bank, to kick off our discussion. We know, Hart, that you are an active promoter of the strong case for road safety investment in the South Asia region. Can you tell us what the World Bank is doing to address speed as a specific safety issue in its roads and urban projects in South Asia?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me on the panel. Let me start a little bit with a personal story. In 2010, I exceeded the speed limit in Switzerland. I didn't hear from the Swiss authorities for 6.5 years. But then, when I was spending the night in Zurich in a hotel, the next morning at 5:30, it knocked on the door and it said, "Hier ist die Kantonspolizei Zürich, machen Sie die Tür auf." I thought, oh my God, what happened? What had happened was that when I got the ticket, because I live in the United States, they hadn't bothered to send the information to the US, but they had kept me for 6.5 years in the system. They took my information that morning, let me go, and said, well, you have to go and settle that ticket. I settled the ticket. I'm not going to tell you how much I paid, but I thought, well, this is actually working here. You know, speeding, you get, they take a photo of you, but they actually find you. That happened in Geneva, and in Zurich, the police got me. Now, last year I was in a different country where I had a driver, and we were going, crossing the border, and then suddenly there was a policeman on the other side of the border, stopped and said, you have been speeding. You don't wear a seatbelt. All wrong. We had not been speeding. I was wearing a seatbelt. But at the end of the day, my driver said, look, let's give him some money, and we're on our way. What's the difference between these two things? It's about enforcement. It is really about enforcement, making sure that you cannot escape. I don't mind having to pay the fee in Switzerland because I know that's a system that works for me. It works for me as somebody who is a roads activist. I'm actually proud of this. Yes, I had to pay the fine, but it's systems that work. So speed limits we have in many countries, but in order to actually enforce them, you need much more. You need to make sure that information is shared, that data is available, that people are actually paying the fine and not are paying their way out. So this is one thing I think that we are struggling with in the development business. I'm in charge of South Asia. 10% of the global motor vehicle fleet, but 25% of the fatalities. In India in particular, the country with the highest number of crash victims, 1/3 of those crash victims, about 100,000, is because of speed. So it is important for us in the World Bank to actually make sure that road safety is involved in everything we are doing. And we are in every sector. We are in the education sector, the health sector, of course, the transport sector, but also the governance and capacity and institution development sector. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that as part of our environmental and social standards, that means to protect the environment and the people, we have a standard that is road safety. Anything that we are doing, any project in the road sector needs to meet a very, very high standard when it comes to road safety. And that means that about 38 billion of our ongoing portfolio is actually, 180 projects, is actually looking at road safety. And we are expanding this now and making sure that we actually help with the institutional development. In India, we have an amended Road Safety Act that is at the federal level. We are going to support India in promulgating that, making it effective through institution building at the state level. So this is the first time that the bank actually is getting involved in the policy agenda of road safety. It is not a project-by-project thing. It is actually a system-wide issue, and this is what we are doing. We have some success stories. If you look at Tamil Nadu, we have a pilot corridor where we were able to reduce the number of fatalities by 25%. So it works. You can have roads that take you from point A to point B in a very timely way and very fast, and it's still safe. We want to do the same thing on a couple of other corridors. So this is something where we actually have putting a lot of money, of resources behind it, but we are also working with a number of partners because it is not just the Ministry of Transportation, it is the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, others who are part of a road council, road safety council. We help set up these institutions, we are supporting them, and we have the convening power of the bank that is very important because at the end of the day, and this was an eye-opener when I meet with the ministers of finance and I show them road safety, I don't show them how many fatalities. I show the minister of finance, how much do you lose every year in growth, in GDP? That is a number that a minister of finance responds to. And I think this is an entry point that you suddenly have the attention.
Well, thank you for that. That's very interesting. And I mean, from my own experience in international development, the idea of building from project to project, building capacity, trying to get straight to good practice in demonstration projects, it's a very powerful means of really assisting countries who want to do more in road safety. Coming back to just the value side for the moment in terms of World Bank activity, as Soames just mentioned, for every 1 kilometre per hour increase in average speed, there's an increase in the risk of crashes resulting in fatal injuries. Very small changes in speed can have rather substantial effects on deaths and serious injuries. In terms of setting speed limits, and in terms of some of the infrastructure projects that you are supporting in South Asia, I mean, a value question, do you think it's acceptable to trade off reductions in journey times, faster trips for increases in deaths and serious injuries, without simultaneously designing in better protection in terms of roads and roadsides and also vehicles? I'm trying to get at really the safe system, the importance of speed to designing a safe system, and the interrelationship between levels of speed, speed limits, the level of protection that roads and roadsides provide, the level of facility in terms of driver assistant technologies and other means that cars provide. What is acceptable? What is in terms of the sort of values that are out there in terms of setting speed limits? What do you think about that? Do you have a view?
Look, I don't really think that you expect an answer from me on this one, because there is no trade-off. There is no trade-off, and I think Soames presented it very well. First of all, the measures to calm traffic are not very costly. I also know that even if you don't have speed limits and so on, that doesn't necessarily mean that you get faster to your destination. So I don't really want to talk about this being a matter of a trade-off, but I think what is important is that we have approaches that are country-specific. If you are in Dhaka, you know that you have buses, rickshaws, cars, all in the same lane. And they all, by definition, go at different speed. So I think what we need to do is we need to adapt to the local situation. We need to have tracks that are reserved for the slow-moving traffic. We need to have tracks that are reserved for vehicles, for cars. The trade-off is, the Minister of Finance from Nepal characterized it very, very directly. He said, look, we have children in the first 1,000 days, before they are born, in the first 2 years, we invest in child health and nutrition. We invest in their education in primary school. We may invest in secondary and in university education. And then somebody gets killed on the road because of speeding. Now, that is an investment that is wiped out. Not only is the investment wiped out, but very often what is also wiped out is the income of the entire family. So the economic costs are exponential. So that's why I'm not saying this is not a matter of a trade-off. I don't think we have a choice. So for us, this is where we actually were working in our projects to make sure that there are safe crossings, flyovers, that schools are not built right at the edge of a highway. And this is where the road safety assessment comes in, because very often children get killed right outside their school. And so we need to make sure that road safety is part and parcel of everything we are doing. The cost is really much, much smaller than what we gain in terms of economic growth. I think the number that SOMS put out there was 24% additional growth over the next several decades. I think that is not peanuts. That is very substantive for the countries that we are working in.
Well, thank you for that answer. Well, perhaps we can go on now to look at some very specific country examples, looking at multi-sectoral approaches to managing speed. And perhaps perhaps we can go to Qatar, and who I know has been active in setting lower limits and engineering speeds down, especially around school zones. Can you say a little about this particular approach, whether or not there are any results yet, and whether or not you're planning to roll it out further?
Sure, thank you. As stated, in Qatar, we succeeded to reduce the negative loss of GDP around $2 billion US dollar due to the loss of death, fatality, and serious injury. And this is show how the major investment costs for any country. As I stated, there is no trade-off for any life for the human. The main element for the safety road here, the main challenge, there is no one authority responsible for this in any country. You will find a lot of stakeholders, Ministry of Interior, Public Authority, Transportation, Ministry of Health. It is a community of the stakeholder. And in Qatar, due to that, we are really committed to reduce the speed and also to reduce the fatality in the state of Qatar. We established for instance, 2013, we established the strategic road safety, and it was chaired by Prime Minister and Minister of Interior with around maybe 31 stakeholders in the state of Qatar, in order to ensure that everyone contribute to this goal. In 2013, it was the total, there were around 235 fatal crash and 650 and the serious injury. Based on that, we established two action plan for 5 years, from 2013 to 2017, and from 2018 to 2022. This action plan lead to have around identify 396 action in each sector in order to ensure mitigate and reduce the risk for the fatality and also for the speed. We have mainly 5 main programs in this strategy. One of them is IRAB, and this is Qatar, maybe the first GCC country implement this system, and it is depend about ranking the number of the star for the road. As you know, Qatar, we are receiving FIFA in 2022, and there is a lot of infrastructure road implemented in this program. We open more than 500 kilometer expressway, despite maybe a lot of them with 5 lane or 4 lane, but we still maintain the speed for 120 kilometer per hour, despite the resistance as explained in the presentation. But as I said, we are really committed to reduce the speed and to mitigate any possibility for the fatality crash in our road. We also establish a program for a school. We identify around more than 524 schools. We reduce the speed in the school to 30 kilometers per hour. We keep more visible sign near to the school, speed hump, and other major action in order to reduce any possibility for the fatality surrounding the school. We finished 90% of this school, and we have now 10%, and we expected by end of 2020 to complete this program. Also for rural...
Can I just ask that, do you have any results from that work so far?
Yes, sorry?
Do you have any results in terms of the effects
yes,
of that program?
Yes, in 2013, it was around 235 fatality crash. We reduced more than 60% by 2020, and we are targeting, inshallah, by 2022 also to be around 100, but also we expected to take more major action to reduce this fatality by 2030.
That's very interesting. And what sorts of things did you do? I mean, you say that you reduced the speed limit to 30k in school zones. I mean, are there other things that you did? Did you put any infrastructural elements in to help manage speeds in that area, or was it just a blanket reduction and you had more police enforcement? What sort of approach was used for that work?
Mainly we use radar. To control the speed, and also the ticketing and fees, especially near to the school, to monitor any unusual speed near to the school.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Perhaps I can ask the minister from Nigeria. It's absolutely wonderful, actually, to have a health minister who is also a trauma surgeon, and obviously your perspectives are going to be very interesting for this session. Can you say something about what Nigeria is doing in terms of speed management? The way in which the problem of speed is perceived in Nigeria, what priority is being given to it? I mean, are there things that have been introduced, measures implemented to reduce speed limits or improve enforcements? Are there specific activities in Nigeria that you can talk to us about, please?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's my great pleasure. The case has been very well made by previous speakers for limiting speed, the deleterious effect that overspeeding or speeding as a whole has, and the damage that follows and the cost of all of it. For us at the back end, those of us who are trauma surgeons, we see the results, and we perhaps even more passionately than others want to see a reduction in deaths and injuries from the road. So we take very active part in measures that are supposed to support accident reduction. In our country, we have a body that is dedicated to managing roads and the use of roads as a Federal Road Safety Corps. They have the task of regulating the use of the roads and have done quite a bit in the past, particularly by introducing speed limiting devices for heavy trucks and commercial vehicles, which between 2015 and 2019 has brought about a 30% decrease in deaths and injuries, equipped with handguns and also radar guns to detect speed. And in close communities, the use of speed breakers, speed bumps that compel drivers to slow down in close communities. So the statistics yesterday that was demonstrated showed that 40% of crashes, particularly in Africa, is to pedestrians, and another 40% to drivers and passengers. Now, I quite clearly believe that the 40% to pedestrians are within urban areas and close communities, and the remaining 40 to drivers and passengers are on the highway, where these fatalities are. So the management at both sides is just very important. On the highway, you need radar guns to be able to detect speeds, and in the cities and close communities, other measures like the speed bumps I was talking about that just now are of importance. But we must also look at the problems that many countries in developing, in low and middle income countries face. First is the fact that the integrity of many vehicles is not of the type you find in Europe or in America or in developed countries. There are, we import a large number of vehicles, used vehicles from Europe and America, which are no longer roadworthy, and then brought into Africa, and somehow or the other they find themselves on the road. That's one risk factor. They try to repair them. Then the second factor is that most vehicles that you have here in Europe go through regular inspections. Many African countries don't have that. So you have an extra hazard for those who use the roads, who are driving vehicles that are unsafe, which adds to the problem of speeding. And then if you look again at the third factor, which is the integrity of the driver himself, is he trained? Quite a few, good majority of drivers never received a formal training. They didn't go to a driving school, and some or the other get a license and operate vehicles. So those are factors that exacerbate the problem of speeding and gives more reason to enforce speeding in low and medium income countries, but also explains the high rate of fatalities and injuries that you see in these countries. So in Nigeria, yes, we are employing these strategies, and in many places also using breathalyzer tests in communities where the use of alcohol is known to be quite common. There are other areas where alcohol is not really much of a problem, the use of alcohol. So if you know the weaknesses that we have in our countries, we adapt to the solutions that we try and find. And the road safety core we have in Nigeria is itself still evolving, still developing, finding more ways of doing the front end, which is preventing injuries and accidents in the first place by taking various measures studying the situation and taking various measures that lead to that end.
Thank you very much.
And reduce the work for us at the back end.
Dave Cliff, Chief Executive of GRSP. You also bring many years of senior roads policing experience to the discussion. We know that the use of speed cameras is a highly important means of managing speeds and most cost effective as well. Can you say something about the new guidance tool that you've been developing with the World Bank to assist countries in improving their speed management? I understand that speed camera deployment has many facets, and I think this guidance is about addressing that. And just also to say that I think that one of the great things about the decade of action so far is the number of really useful tools that have been produced in many areas for specific interventions, IRAP, which was mentioned previously, the various NCAPs, various guidance that WHO has produced with other partners, road safety management guidance, which the World Bank has produced. So, over to you, Dave.
Thanks, Jean. The automated enforcement guide goes through systematically and looks at the conditions required to make an automated enforcement system effective. What I would say firstly is that over the last few days we've heard about intelligent speed adaptation, geofencing, limiting vehicle speeds, engineering for safer speeds. All those things are brilliant, will work exceedingly well, but they will take time to implement. As Soames beautifully highlighted, the thing that can be done tomorrow, if we choose to, is to strongly enforce speed limits, reduce speed limits, and the effects of that are profound. So the enforcement guide that we developed jointly with Soames at the Global Road Safety Facility of the World Bank is designed to say things like, have you got enabling legislation?
is the best method for you a fixed roadside speed camera, or is it a mobile camera that moves around the network for a generalised network effect? Is time over distance technology the right solution for you? Have you got a penalty regime that can hold drivers accountable, as Hart beautifully described earlier, so that if someone infringes, we know there is a mechanism for holding the person accountable? Have you got a penalty regime that is set at the right level to deter offending? Have you got a public awareness campaign ready to run that supports the program, explains to the public why these systems are being installed and the safety benefits? So really what we wanted to do was to explain in detail what the requirements are to implement an automated enforcement program effectively. What I'd also say is that automated enforcement is a great benefit in many places because their vehicle registration systems or driver licensing systems or fines enforcement systems or legislation are not at the point where those opportunities yet exist. Manual enforcement, equipping police officers with the skills and the equipment to know how to use it effectively, teaching them about things like procedural justice and dealing with the ethical issues, again, which Hart talked about a little bit earlier, are also part of the way in which we instruct. Probably the last thing I would say is there's effective and there's ineffective speed enforcement. So by teaching police how to target effectively, how to do a anywhere, anytime approach where drivers don't know and can't predict where police will be, and therefore they're forced to slow down across the whole network and produce those general effects, is also part of the training that we provide through the Global Road Safety Partnership. And just the last comment would be about how do you measure effectiveness? How do you know if your speed enforcement program is working? Well, ultimately, the final outcome will be that there'll be reduction in deaths and injuries. But the intermediate measure that we strongly advocate is looking at behavioural outcomes. So by tracking mean speeds across the whole network through a wide variety of data points, looking at urban speeds and what the means are, looking at rural speeds and what the means are over time, means that you can stand back and independently monitor the effectiveness of the program. So very small changes in mean speeds produce major casualty reduction effects. So just as an example, in my home country, New Zealand, through a strong enforcement program, we reduced speeds over a 3-month period by 0.89, sounds very small, doesn't it, kilometres an hour. And the science behind it said we saved 60 million in fatality costs through that 3-month period. So being able to track speed, look at the enforcement method, deploy effectively with the right equipment, there are major benefits to reducing casualty crashes.
Thank you. Just a quick question now, because we must open the discussion to the floor any minute now. We've talked a lot about the benefits of managing speed in terms of fatal and serious injury reduction, but of course there are other ways in which managing speed can contribute to achieving a variety of sustainable development goals. Perhaps, Hart, I can ask you if you could cite some examples of where it would be beneficial in terms of improving business cases, although business cases are already pretty good in terms of the serious and fatal injury reduction. But I mean, aligning with other areas to achieve co-benefits, are there some quick examples you could give? I mean, we really do have to shift to the floor in a minute, but we have to talk about this.
Maybe just three brief remarks. One is supporting and enforcing safe road safety is not a single target goal. It actually helps in many ways. And we in the World Bank, we are guided by the SDGs. And when you look at where do the accidents happen, it's not in the gated communities where the better off live, but it's really in high density areas and so on. So very often it's the poorest segments, the most vulnerable segments of society that are affected by unsafe roads. And so this is clearly one area where unsafe roads is really a poverty issue. So by making roads safer, we are actually helping with poverty elimination, poverty mitigation. Same thing when it comes to road safety. We always have to think of public transport, and there is a gender dimension to it, and I think we had a separate panel. My colleague Carla was talking about that. So the gender dimension is very important. And lastly, the third point is climate change. Speed management means management of the traffic flow. And if you're not stuck in traffic, you're getting actually faster from point A to point B. That means reduction in carbon emissions. So I see a lot of other co-benefits that come with better road safety management.
Thank you so much for setting that out. Okay, let's take a few questions. Please keep the questions short, no statements, sorry, no time. I see one over there. Antonio Avenoso. Please direct questions either to a specific panelist or to the panel in general.
Thank you very much. Antonio Venoso, European Transport Safety Council in Brussels. I just wanted to ask to the panelists how they see the role of technology for speeding, for preventing speeding, and namely intelligent speed assistance, which is being mandated now by the European Union in the General Safety Regulation. And what is the role also for other countries? It's not rocket science, it's a technology that works very effectively. And when we hear more and more from the automotive industry that we're moving towards autonomous driving, how can we have this tension between automated driving on one side, and on the other side also having resistance to a technology that is already there?
Good question. Perhaps...
You want to take a few?
Okay, yes, that gentleman there.
Hello, John Whiteleg, Liverpool, John Moores University. Just a short question. I'm totally convinced about the science and the research and the background demonstrated enormous benefits from reducing speeds. I'm increasingly concerned that that is out of phase with the organisational and institutional lack of capacity, lack of interest, lack of will, lack of conviction to do things. So I want advice, and I want to give one small example. English local authorities have control over setting speed limits, not national, on the majority of roads, not motorways, obviously. In one part of England, Shropshire...
Could you keep it short, please?
I need to give a little bit of detail, but I promise you it will be short. In Shropshire, the local authority rejects 20 mile per hour. The police refuse to enforce 20 mile per hour. The police object to 20 mile per hour. The Director of Public Health rejects 20 mile per hour. And the discussion on reducing speeds is totally closed down. How do we deal with that?
Well, thank you. I mean, perhaps can I ask Dave, do you want to lead off on the intelligent speed assistance issue?
I think there's no doubt whatsoever that intelligent speed adaptation offers huge potential. What I would say, though, is that it's going to take time. Our primary focus, in terms of our work, is across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, where the rates are highest and increasing. So while those things are coming, what we can do immediately is to improve manual enforcement of speed limits, to bring those things into play. So totally agree with them. Just in response to the gentleman who talked about a Shropshire example, I've got a brilliant example from my home country about a complete failure in terms of road safety from New Zealand, where we had a system that was working. Deaths were reduced down to 5.7 per 100,000, but through a failure in enforcement, where the enforcement dropped off significantly through a lack of leadership in a number of areas, the method of monitoring speed dissipated because it wasn't understood by a new regime that came into play. The penalties weren't increased, investment didn't increase, And deaths have now increased in New Zealand by around 50% over the last 3 years. Hospitalisations have increased by 30%, inflicting massive cost on the community. And it's a failure of leadership, and it's a failure of speed management primarily. So the answer, I think, is if you don't invest in managing speed, do so at your peril, and there's a great country example of that failure and what it's cost.
Anybody else want to comment?
Yes, thank you, I did. Thanks, Jane. First, I think congratulations to Europe for making ISA mandatory. It is good technology, it will save lives, and I think it offers us the opportunity to manage speed without, and I know there are a lot of politics to getting that in, but it offers us the opportunity then to manage speed more universally without a lot of the politics, for example, of Shropshire not wanting to do this and someone else not wanting to do that. Having it uniform to an area this large through a technology that works is a fantastic outcome. As Dave pointed out though, 93% of the deaths are occurring in low and middle income countries. We will see benefits of that if that technology is sustained as those vehicles come into Africa and Asia, etc., as second-hand vehicles. There is that opportunity, but the maintenance and the inspection of those vehicles to ensure the technology remains is critical. Then the infrastructure has to exist in countries for this to work. You have to know, you have to have a mapping system and GPS that tells the vehicle what speed limit it's in. If we can have those systems in place, then the longer term broader global benefit is very important. The last thing I would say was, I was in a panel this morning where one person got up and said, we had to fight like crazy in New York City to get them to give us speed cameras. And I think sometimes the answer in communities where they won't do it is having a voice that says, we demand it. We demand that you do something about the speeds here. We are the people at risk. So we should own that and have that kind of advocacy.
Thank you. Take one more question. Perhaps from somewhere over there. Oh, that lady there.
Thank you. Mavis Johnson from Canada. I have a question about if any of you have a good example of changing traffic safety culture around speeding. There are people who talk about we have changed the culture about drink driving. It's become socially unacceptable to drink and drive. I don't believe that totally myself, but there are a lot of people that think that. But I think we do need to we know a lot in the advancements in enforcement and engineering have been fantastic, but I think what we need to do is go back to getting people's belief systems to talk about why they should not speed, so that they shouldn't need to have all of these things. They should say to themselves, I'm not going to speed. I don't believe that anybody should behave like that on the road. So I just wondered if there was anybody that had any experience of
Thanks for the question.
handling.
Saad, would you like to address that?
Actually, I was maybe same opinion that we always speak about enforcement. However, we should also see it from the other angle about awareness and education. Because as much as you enforce and the people not aware or educated, they will always find some way to overcome or bypass this enforcement. For that, I think we should also focus about strength, the awareness and education for the people in order to be obliged by themselves to reduce the speed and maintain the safe driving.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, we know when we combine police enforcement and publicity, it can really make a difference, if only for the short term. Okay, I think we unfortunately have run out of time. There were a few other questions I hope that we'd got round to, but never mind. Soames, would you like to just, for a couple of minutes, 2 minutes max, just sum up for us? Thank you.
Gee, yes. Well, thank you to the panel and thank you to the audience. It's quite a big audience to be here, considering how many parallel sessions we have. So we really appreciate the focus. And I think having this level of appreciation of the importance of speed, as shown by these numbers, is itself of value. And Jean, thank you for your expertise in guiding us and guiding some discussion. I think we are seeing the opportunities. I think we're seeing that with better enforcement, with better infrastructure, with better technology, that we can manage speeds. We're also able to identify that as we manage speeds, we don't see the sometimes assumed economic disbenefits, but in fact often we see a plethora of other benefits that will contribute effectively to the economy, to the global health of the planet. So those values really make it critical for us to manage speeds effectively, and it can be done. And it can be done surprisingly inexpensively. And I know, for example, I've visited the school zones in Qatar that you've put up, and there is no better example on the planet of getting speeds down with simple measures, with raised platform crossings, with bollards so people can't park on the footpath where they shouldn't be parking, etc. It's a fantastically safe environment, and I think those are just a great model of how we can manage speeds and manage behaviours through the environment. I think we too often think it's a behavioural problem. We have to change the people to change their behaviour. People's behaviour is determined by the circumstance. If we change the road circumstance, the road furniture, we will change the behaviour of the people. And that is one of our most valuable opportunities. And Dave, thank you for outlining this tool, which, by the way, if anyone wants it, I have a tiny little flyer here which has a website which will give you the link to the tool to assess readiness for speed cameras, etc., and also give you the link to our country profiles report, which we released yesterday. And my apologies for that shameless plug for that report. But I think there is some guidance, as Jean pointed out. There is a great manual on speed management. There is now a great manual on assessing whether you're ready for speed cameras. And I think we can all learn from each other to learn how to do this better, how to do it more effectively, and how to do it in a way that brings the voices in the community we don't often hear from along with us, those voices who want speeds managed.
Well, thank you very much, Soames. And can I ask everybody to show their appreciation for the great panel that we've got?
Thank you.
And a big thank you to all for participating. I'm sorry there wasn't further time for questions, but next time. Thank you.